Hello friends, this is the mask we're gonna be making today, and I call it shape retaining mask. It's a version of your regular pleat mask, but I have top stitch each pleat, so when you wear it and when the mask is being expanded, it retains its shape nicely. And on the back side we have a filter pocket with opening on both sides, and it is big enough for you to insert a surgical mask inside, or you can just wear it as is. It also has a layer of optional interfacing, but it's up to you if you want to add that layer. So without further ado, let me share with you how I make it. So here are the materials we will need to make this mask. You will need a piece of fabric that is 8 inches by 8 inches for the front side of the mask. And this is interfacing cut to the same size, 8 inches by 8 inches as the front piece. But you don't have to use this if you choose not to. I'm just finally able to get this from Joanne. So I'm gonna add this into my mask, but you can bypass that if you don't. If you feel like 2 layers already hot enough for the summer, you don't have to add that. And then we'll have a back side of the fabric cut to the same width, but a little bit shorter at the width here. So this piece is gonna be 8 inches wide, just like our front fabric, but 7.5 inches this way. So if you look at them on top of each other, the back side just a little bit shorter than the front side. This we do this because later after we sew the mask together, the back side fabric, it won't peek through the front side. And then we need 2 smaller pieces to make our casings. The width is 2 inches and the length, this one is about 4 3/4. So if you you can do 2 by 5 or 2 by 4.5. It's not that crucial this way, but I wouldn't make it any shorter than 4 inches. So let's just say 2 by 5 for 2 pieces for the casings, and then 2 pieces of elastic. For my elastic, I cut it at 8 inches, 8.5 inches, but you just do whatever you need for the elastic you have. It might need to be a little longer or shorter, depends on the material you have at hand. So this is our materials we need to make the mask. Step, we will be creating the 3 pleats for the front side of the mask. If you have interfacing, if you choose to use interfacing, first of all, we line up these 2 layers on top of each other. But if you don't use interfacing, then don't worry about that. So after you line them up, turn to the back side. We want to fold the fabric in half. This way is actually easier than your regular pleated mask. So we fold this in half and we'll bring this to the sewing machine. So here's our fold. We just top stitch, like basically sew all these layers together. You can do a 1/4 inch seam allowance or 3/16, doesn't really matter, depends on which way you like it. So I'm gonna do this on the sewing machine really quick. I'm doing just 3/16 seam allowance for these. You don't have to back stitch at all because it will all be hidden later. So this is our first fold. So the next one, we turn to the back side. You just fold it. You grab this 2-layer and just fold it toward the line you just made. You can press it a little bit if you want to. And then we bring to the sewing machine. Do exactly the same thing we just did. 3/16 seam allowance. Just do one line all the way down. You don't have to backstitch, and you don't have to backstitch here and here. So I'm just gonna do it really quick here. So here's our second line. The last one, same thing. You turn to the back side. You fold it up to the middle line. Press a little and just bring this to the sewing machine and again stitch one line all the way down. 3/16 or 1/4 inch seam allowance. After we stitch them up, this is how the front piece looks like right now. Hopefully you can see. This is the front, and this is how it looks like on the back side. So the next step, get your clips ready. We'll be creating the pleats, and because we already sewed them together, it should be really easy to create the pleats. You basically just grab them and just fold them down. See, so the width, we want to keep him at like 4 inches and a quarter. Look at them and then make sure all the lines are parallel with each other. That looks pretty good. So because the reason why is because if you're gonna insert a surgical mask inside, this is how wide this surgical mask is, and you want to leave a little bit space, so we can easily insert one after we're done with the mask. So check your pleats, it looks pretty even and parallel. So what I do right now, it doesn't look too bad, but what I usually do is if it looks like it's very uneven on the side, I'll just use a ruler and use a rotary cutter to trim it down so it has a one clean edge. Same thing on this side. Okay, by the way, if you don't have one rotary cutter, I highly recommend you getting one. It'll make it so much easier. Okay, so this looks pretty good right now. 4 inches and a quarter. So we just clip them together. This clips more than the pin. I think it's just a lot easier to clip it instead of fighting with the pins. Same thing on this side. Just clip the pleats together. Okay, so after we're done this clipping, we just bring it to the sewing machine. Just do one line here all the way down, another line here all the way down to fix the pleats in place. Okay, so now we're gonna be stitching these pleats together, and the seam allowance is 1/4 inch. Okay. These. The next step is we are gonna be making our back panel. Just like the front panel, but we won't need to stitch up each pleat because we won't need them to stay crisp like the front panel does. Okay, so the same thing, we just fold the fabric in half. Use your fingernail to press it and open up, and then fold the downside toward the middle and crease it, and the top side toward the middle again. Press it. Lines. Then we just use your finger. We just fold it down like these. So when you measure the width of this panel, you want it to be about, let's see, 3 inches and 3/4. So it's at this point it's about 4 and 1/4. So, and then you just clip them up on both sides, and you send it through the sewing machine. Just do a stitch line here and here, like 3/16. Doesn't have to be too wide because the purpose is just to hold these pleats down, get them all secured together. Okay, so after you're done, it should look like this. Okay, so all the pleats are secure. And then we will fold the raw edge. We'll roll it up about 1 inch, not 1 inch, like a 1/4 inch, and then roll it up again another 1/4 inch, just like when we usually do when we're hemming the edge. So okay, and then you would do a stitch line across to sew them together, and the same thing on this side. Okay. The next step, we will be attaching the front panel to the back panel. So the front panel, just remember the pleats are always facing down when you wear it. And then the back panel, if you look at the medical mask, this is how the front looks like. The pleats facing down. When you turn to the back, the pleats are facing up. So we do just the same. The pleats will be facing up in the back panel. So just make sure we pay attention when we attach these two panels. So then we want to turn it right side against right side. Let's just align the top edge. Just try to center both panels. That looks pretty good, pretty centered. Just look at both sides. Align the top edges, and then we will just stitch them together with the seam allowance 1/4 inch. We're gonna take care of this side. So remember, earlier we said the back panel is gonna be a little bit shorter than the front panel. So what we do is we just grab this back panel, just bring it up a bit and line up both edges. Then we just do the same thing we just did, just stitch them up. Both panels attached together. The next step, I like to use the pinking shears. Just trim this raw edge just a little bit so later it won't fray. So you do it just enough, but make sure you don't cut the stitch line, because some of the like especially like here, it's gonna be exposed later, so we want to prevent it from fraying when it's being washed. Then we turn this mask so far, right side up. Okay. So you can use your iron to press the seam right here. Just make sure when you do it, this back panel, it's completely behind the front panel. So on the front, you won't see any of this white color peeking through. Okay. You can use an iron, or I'm just gonna use my fingernail to press it for now. Just double check. Okay, and on the machine, we just top stitch along the bottom, along the top and the bottom, like 1/8 of an inch, just top stitch on both sides. You don't have to back stitch. And I've already done it for the top side, so it looks like this right now. Next step, we will be creating our casings. So here's the little piece that's 2 inches by 4.5 inches long, 2 inches wide. And one thing I want to point out is ideally you want the fabric of the casing go the same direction as the front of your mask. But for this one, my strawberry is gonna go sideways because I don't want to waste any fabric, so I'm okay with this one. But if you have a pattern that's gonna look awkward sideways, just so you know that it's probably better to pay attention when you cut the pieces for your casings. Okay, so with this piece, what you want to do is you want to make them the right side against the right side of the mask, and just line up the edge. See the top of edge of this piece to the edge of your mask. Just try to center it. Just double check, center them together, and then you clip them. Oops. Clip them together. Now we turn it to the back side. And you roll this extra piece down. Make sure it's pretty snug against the edge of the mask. And you just clip it. Same thing on the bottom side. Roll it up and clip it down. Do the same thing for this side. So after you're done this, the next step will be just bring this thing to your sewing machine and just stitch from the top to the bottom. Let's do let's see, 3/8 from the edge. Just stitch it down to secure all these layers together. All right. We can take these clips off. And we do the same thing for this side. Make sure you back stitch here. We have our mask look like this so far. So you want to turn to the front and you grab this casing fabric, just fold it over. Okay. Number 2. And turn to the back again. So you wanna just use your fingernail to kind of just press it. And when you do this, I like to just kind of taper the edge slightly in a little bit instead of straight down. Just fold it in just enough. So when you do the next step, which is rolling this up and up again, the back panel will be completely hidden when you look at the front. It will look clean. You won't see any of this panel poking through the front side. Okay, so do the taper it in a little bit, and then we fold the edge once. You can press it with your fingernail again, and twice, to a point that you completely cover these 2 stitch lines. Cover it up. Side, do you see the front side and the back side? Like this point, it pretty much match up pretty well, and that's what you want. Okay, so double check on this side, and then you can clip them together. The same thing for this side. Okay, double check the front side. It looks good. So bring this to a sewing machine and just stitch a line at like 1/8 of an inch from this edge, just all the way down. And I like to do this with the back side facing me, so that way I know all this layer will be stitched together. If I do it from the front side, sometimes not all the layer get caught. But if I do it from the back side, I know they're gonna be okay. All right. One tip is when I stitch it up like this, I start not right at the edge where there are multiple layers of fabric. I started like in a little bit and then go back stitch a little bit and then come back. Okay, so it makes it just a little bit easier this way. And just continue. And back stitch. Okay. Looks like this. Front side. And then we do it the same thing for the other side. Moving on to the very last step, threading the elastics through the casings. The elastic I use, they're very thin and they're rope shaped. They're about 5/32 inches wide. So I cut them at 8.5 inches long, and I will use a lighter, just heat seal all the ends so they don't fray later. But you might need to make sure the elastic you use could be heat sealed. Just double check that. So I already thread this side through, and we're gonna do this side. I couldn't find the tool I usually use, so today I'm using this tool I got from the craft store. I think they're made for flat elastic, but if I just press the end, just press flatten it, it will work. And also I've seen people use a crochet hook to thread the elastic, and I thought that's pretty clever. Okay, so just pull this through. And as always, I like to tie adjustable knot for my ear loops, but we're gonna do it a little differently than we usually do in my previous video. So with this side of the elastic, also make sure if you're gonna do the same thing, keep it on the same side. Okay, so I'm gonna do the bottom side because remember the pleats facing down. So the bottom side on both ends, we'll just tie a simple knot first. Side. The end that we pull to adjust the length of the ear loop. That's why you want to keep on both the same side so you don't get confused. So on this side, we'll tie a knot as well. Before you pull it, you have this little loop in your hand. So you grab the other end, just thread it through, and make sure that it's above the loop when you do that, and you just tied it up. It looks like this, and you will be able to pull this end to make it longer or shorter. Okay, so we do this side. Loop, and you just close it up. To adjust the length. Alright, so this is how the face mask looks like. We're done. So just to recap, it has 3 layers, 2 layers of 100% cotton fabrics, and the middle layer of interfacing. you can bypass that interfacing layer if you don't have it, or if you don't want to add it into your mask. And all the pleats have been sewn together, so when you expand the mask, it retains the shape nicely. And we have a filter pocket with openings on both sides. You can insert a filter material in between, or you can also insert a medical mask inside. And usually what I do is I will just clip off the ear loop of the medical mask, so you don't have them hanging on the side. And you just expand it. You can wear it like these, or you don't have to insert anything if you don't want to, because it's so hot. You can just wear the mask as is by itself. Okay, so give this a try. Let me know if you like it. This should be easier to do the pleats on this mask than your traditional pleated mask. So just give it a try and let me know if this works for you. Okay, thank you.